Barrow in Furness is a large industrial town which grew from a tiny 19th century hamlet to the biggest iron and steel centre in the world and a major shipbuilding force in just 40 years. There has been many attempts of demoralising Barrow in Furness, such as during World War II, when Barrow was a target for the German air forces looking to disable the town's shipbuilding capabilities. But there was one thing that truly put a dent in the morale of the people from Barrow in Furness. A man from within their own community. A man who brutally and savagely murdered two little innocent girls. This is the story of Thomas Lionel Burns, the Hunchback Cannibal from Barrow in Furness. The quiet tranquility of Barrow in Furness has remained largely in place since the town first grew around the estate of the 12th century Furness Abbey. Furness Abbey was founded almost 900 years ago and was once the largest and wealthiest monastery in the northwest of England. It was a place of prayer, piety and pilgrimage for the people of the time. Furness Abbey now lies in ruin, just like the memories of the families of poor little Sheila Barnes and Lavinia Murray, who were both just 5 years old and whose life was stolen in the most sadistic and brutal way possible. Today, we learn how a neighbour from an ordinary street in an ordinary town in the heart of Cumbria murdered, mutilated and sadistically ingested parts of their bodies. This is their story. On a beautiful summer's day, on June the 11th in 1958, the sun was shining, the birds were singing, and two little schoolgirls were out playing, enjoying the summer evening sun, right here on York Street in Barrow in Furness. The girls were playing along here when they approached this house here, number 32 York Street. As they reached closer to the home, they heard some music coming from the house. Just soft plunks of a piano. They were resonating from the house. The interesting sounds piqued the girls' curiosity and they decided to investigate the sound. They were never seen alive again. Both the children's parents hadn't seen them since 7:45 p.m. that evening. And by the next day, a town-wide hunt had been organised by volunteers and police to find the little girls. Frogmen were brought in to search nearby rivers and the nearby reservoir. Near the home, while the police employed sniffer dogs and even the sea cadets to help. Police and volunteers were searching everywhere, even knocking door to door. On the afternoon of June the 12th, Detective Constable Mountford, he called at number 32 York Street, a home which had drawn his attention because all of the blinds were closed when he went to knock, and there was no reply whatsoever. So he called again in the evening, and the hunchback form of an elderly man called Tom Burns answered the door. The policeman asked if he could help in their inquiries regarding the two missing children. Tom Burns replied, "No, I am sorry. I cannot. I only wish I could. It's a bad business." DC Mountford asked Tom Burns if he had any outhouses in the back of the house that were not used regularly. And Burns said he had one, but he checked it and no one was there. So the policeman asked if Tom had been out at all the night before. And Burns replied, no, adding that he had gone to bed at 5 p.m. that previous evening. He also said that he knew someone was knocking at the door earlier in the evening, but he was lying down due to his ill health. The policeman, he then left him, asking him to call him if he found anything out. Burns had obviously piqued the interest of the authorities, because a Lancashire constabulary officer returned to the home again on June the 13th at 10:25 a.m, 2 days after the girls had gone missing, and he asked to come in. Burns let him in. The policeman asked him about the girls, to which Burns replied, "Yes, I heard about it. Isn't it terrible? I think someone has taken them away in a car." The policeman asked if any children had called at his home, and Burns, he said no. It is at this point that Burns' grasp on reality seemed to slip, telling obvious lies. Telling lies seemed to come naturally to him. Things that were so easily proved to be false. So he told the officer that he lived alone and that he kept the house locked up, a statement that he would later contradict when he mentioned his wife. But the policeman, he asked if he could look in the backyard, which made Burns turn defensive. The 71-year-old said, "There is no need. I have been in the shed and no one is there." So the policeman then went into the shed, of course, followed by Burns. Now in the shed there was a recently dug hole, but it was easily recognisable as a grave. When questioned, Burns pointed to some hyacinth bulbs just lying on the ground nearby, and he said that they had gone rotten and he was going to put new ones in, so like he was gardening. The panic was setting in. So the policeman, they went back into the house and he asked if he could look in the bedrooms, a request that Burns refused. When the policeman asked why, Burns said they were sentimental reasons, so he can't go up. The policeman asked if he'd been up there recently, and Burns said he hadn't been upstairs in the bedroom for weeks. The officer's interest had been piqued, and he pressed Burns, asking him why he objected to him going upstairs. Burns replied, "Whatever you say, you're not going up. It's in a mess. It would be all right if my wife were here, but she's in Rouse." So Burns has at this point mentioned a wife who is in the nearby Barrow suburb of Rouse, when he previously said he lived alone. So the policeman asked if he was hiding something upstairs, and Burns, he said, "No, I can't let you go up." Eventually, the officer, without much effort, forced his way upstairs. As he did so, he later reported hearing a despairing Burns say, "I'm buggered now." When the officer reached the landing, he headed into the bedroom, where he found what the town of Barrow had been searching for 48 hours. The two girls lay dead in the room. One was lying on a wicker basket, and another was lying on a mattress. They had both been severely mutilated. The bodies of Lavinia and Sheila had both been sexually assaulted, mutilated by knives. Their throats were cut, and both were missing body parts, which could not be found in the York Street home. He had cut off the foot and attempted to amputate the leg, just above the knee. And this was on Sheila, who had numerous injuries, including swollen eyes, indicating that she had been crying when she died. Her throat was cut, and her privates had been targeted by a knife. Burns had also carved out 2 large steak-sized chunks of meat from her upper and lower leg muscles. Lavinia Murray had almost been decapitated. Her throat and privates had been cut. When the bodies were found, Burns immediately claimed to feel ill and faint, and he asked to sit down. He then told the officer, "Sex made me do it." Tom Burns proceeded to confess to the crimes almost immediately, recounting the story of the piano and the arrival of the 2 girls to his home. He said, "I was playing the piano when they came in. I showed them how to play. They came in here and I undressed them. I was sitting in this chair. They laughed when I felt their bottoms. I don't know what came over me, but I picked up a knife off the table and I just cut the ginger girl's throat. The other one laughed at me. She was standing over there. I cut her throat." The bastard Burns confessed to attempting to rape both girls, and even told the officer that he possibly performed necrophilia on the corpses but couldn't remember. But the most gruesome confession was saved for last. Before officers clamped Burns in handcuffs and led him from 32 York Street to be formally charged, the 71-year-old told the officers that the day after he had killed the girls, he had cut off Sheila's foot, which he was going to roast and eat. Officers actually found a plate in the house with the remains of some meat dish spread across it. The meat later tested positive for human blood. Burns had eaten parts of the girls. Police also found buckets that tested positive for blood that had been recently painted and they were still wet, as well as a dishcloth. Burns had tried to drain their blood. When Burns was arrested, a massive crowd of residents turned up at the door at number 32 York Street and they threw bricks through that window. Angry and devastated at the loss of two innocent children brutally murdered by this horrible, disgusting and evil man. They wanted him dead. The one picture we have of Burns shows the frail, baffled old man who had a hunched back being taken from his home, surrounded by tall figures of officers protecting him from the justified angry crowd seeking revenge. 100 people stood in the gallery when Burns sat in the dock between two uniformed officers. He was charged and gave no reply before being remanded until July the 23rd at Walton Gaol in Liverpool. In October, Burns was brought before the Lancaster Assizes for trial. Proceedings were rather short-lived. It was becoming clear that Burns' sanity was not just shaky, but wholly depraved. So the jury at Lancaster Assizes found him to be insane and unfit for trial, leading to Burns' incarceration at Broadmoor Hospital for the criminally insane. There are no records of what happened to Tom after he was institutionalised at Broadmoor. We can only assume he died at Broadmoor and was never released, joining the ranks of David Copeland, Robert Napper and Peter Sutcliffe in never leaving the hospital. But the memory of Burns' crimes lived on. So there you have it, folks. The evil and sadistic story of Tom Lionel Burns from Barrow In Furness and what he did to two 5-year-old girls, Sheila Barnes and Lavinia Murray, on a summer's evening in 1958. One of the most horrific stories I have ever heard, and a tragic ending. Absolutely. No human being deserves that ending, let alone two innocent 5-year-old angels. Absolutely crazy. Now, a man in his 70s doesn't just wake up and think, I'm going to kill and eat people. He must have done this before, no doubt. But to who? A question we will never find the answer. So that's it. That's the tragic tale, guys. And it's a horrible story to tell. But when I read it, I felt it certainly needed sharing. It was one of the most horrible stories I've ever heard. I did go to the cemetery because I found the sections of the cemetery that they're buried in, but I couldn't find the graves of the two poor little girls. It was an absolute shame. I really tried. The footage that you saw in this video at the cemetery was actually Barrow In Furness cemetery, and that was me up there having a look. And I tried to find it, guys, and I was sad that I couldn't, and I spent ages up there. But it is what it is. So I'd like to take this opportunity, guys, and thank you so much for tuning in and watching this story. It's one of those where I shan't say I hope you enjoyed it, but I hope you found it somewhat interesting and intriguing, and no doubt join me in hoping that son of a gun rots in hell, the horrible son of a bee. But anyway, so thank you very much, folks. I really do appreciate it. Until next time, you all take care and all the best.